Hello and welcome back once again to Movie Reviews. Just keep kicking my mic stand, sorry about that. So, finally made it across town to see a few movies. Before I get into what I've seen, I just want to take a moment to say I don't know if I'll be able to make it back across town to see the rest of the movies that I wanted to see this month. As much as that really irritates me because I wanted to fill out my movie reviews a little bit more for this year. For those of you who don't know, I've had this constant battle back and forth with my car. I've had it since about 2008. It's a 2000, and it seems like almost every year something else breaks on it. And right around the time I'm able to get the first thing fixed, I'll drive it for less than a month afterwards and something else breaks. For the most part, the stuff isn't super expensive parts. Although if I take it to an auto garage, they want to charge me like 10 times the price for the parts, plus a lot more for the labor. So every time I take it in there for a quote on something, I usually get an answer of, it'll be about $400 to $900, depending on what it is I'm asking them. And when I ask them, give me a breakdown of what's what am I paying this $900 for? They're like, the part itself is like $200-300, and I'm like, really? Because I can walk into AutoZone and buy it off the shelf right now for $45. And then they're like, then there's like $300-400 for labor. I'm like, for what? It's a 20-minute job. You charge $80 an hour, so at most you're charging me for 1 hour, maybe 2 if you run into any problems. It shouldn't be more than $160 plus the parts, so I shouldn't be paying more than like $250 total for anything I have done to the vehicle. But they keep telling me, it's like $400 to $900 depending on what it is, like I said. So I usually end up doing the work myself. I go buy the parts. The problem is we're in the middle of winter right now, and it is freezing, and I'm not going to be crawling around outside in the cold under the car. So I either have to try and make it work until it starts to get warmer and I can work on the car, or I just have to go without a car. And not having a car means I can't drive 10 miles down the street to see movies. So these might be the rest of the movie reviews for the year. Hopefully not. Maybe on my day off I could take the bus down there, if the bus even goes that far. Maybe I'll rent a car for the day and go make a day out of it. I don't know. But that's enough of that. Let's get into what movies I did finally get around to seeing. Again, these have been out for a while. I was trying to play catch-up before I got into the new stuff. But the first movie up that I got to see is Peanuts, the Peanuts movie. What did I think of the Peanuts movie? I think had it had a little more structure, I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. I'm not saying that it was a bad movie, just that they only seem to take a lot of the familiar stuff from the old comic panels, the older movies. Was Charlie Brown a TV series at one point? I seem to remember it having a bunch of shorts on TV at one point. But it seems like they took all the little tropes from all those and tried to form a movie around it, and the movie is just kind of, I don't want to say badly formed, but it kind of skips around a bit too much. Instead of having a linear thing, it kind of jumps over a long period of time rather quickly, and it doesn't give you any indication that things have shifted. And they also pad it out a lot with, let's make sure we hit all these tropes. Okay, well, where can we put them? Just hammer it in here. It'll fit. And really, like I said, had it been structured a little bit better, I think it could have been a little bit better movie. But again, that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I understand the creators' sons were both, I think it's 2 sons, or son and daughter. I think it's 2 sons. I know at least one of them was heavily involved. I think both were, to some degree, to make sure that it lived up to what they felt their father would have approved of, because he was really strict with his characters. There were only a few people he trusted to do anything other than him doing it all himself. So I understand they were involved in it heavily, so they obviously signed off on it, but compared to some of the more classic Charlie Brown specials and movies, This one, honestly, it's been a while since I've seen one, but this one seems just kind of pasted together out of all the old stuff and kind of haphazardly thrown together. But again, that's not to say I didn't enjoy the movie, because I did like the movie. I just, like I said, I think it could have been better had they worked a little bit more on it. So getting into the movie, Charlie Brown's being his normal goofball self. It's like the first day of winter, and everyone's like going out to play hockey, and he goes to fly a kite instead. So everyone's like, "You blockhead! Who tries to fly a kite in the winter?" And he has a reasonable explanation for it. He's thinking that the kite-eating tree is asleep right now, so it's not going to eat his kite. Makes sense, right? So he goes out to fly the kite. Of course, the kite-eating tree eats it. So we nailed that, hammered that nail in. Which the kite-eating tree does come back into play later, but, we got that one trope in there, so, we can move on to the next one. So then they go to school, and the little redheaded girl moves to town, or, she moves like right across the street from Charlie Brown, so, again, sorry for kicking my microphone stand. So she moves in, which doesn't really make sense, because when she moves in, Charlie Brown's saying she's new, so, maybe if I meet her early enough before she learns my reputation and like all the weird stuff I've done in the past that make people think I'm a goofball, maybe she won't see me that way. And then it's like flashing all these little things in his head, and what they are is little clips from the older movies. Like it shows him with the little Christmas tree, the little wilted one before it gets turned into a nice tree. Which, if I remember right, the little redheaded girl already existed in that one. So I like that they're throwing back to, hey, all those did happen. We're just continuing the story from there. But at the same time, they're changing the continuity a bit because, like I said, I believe she already existed in that universe. So anyway, she moves to town. And then they go back to school, and she comes into the class. And of course, Charlie Brown instantly falls in love with her and starts kind of stalking her in a way. It's kind of creepy, but, it's little kids. When you like somebody, you kind of, you're kind of awkward towards them, but at the same time, you're being more awkward towards yourself in a way. So he's trying to find a way to impress her. So then there's like a couple different events that come up, like I think first there was a talent show, and he's like, I'll impress her with my skill at the talent show. And of course something goes wrong at the talent show, so it doesn't work out. Then like the school dance comes up, and he's like, I'm going to be the most awesomest dancer, and because I guess whoever wins the best dancer award out of the boys and girls, then they have to dance together. That's like a thing. And he's like looking in her window and sees that she likes to dance, so he's like, oh, I'll become a good dancer, and then we'll both be the best dancers at the dance, and then we'll have to dance together. So all that's going on, and then something screws up at the dance, even though he's technically awarded best dancer. The dance gets called off, and he doesn't really get to dance with her. Then there was something else that happened, but I can't remember what it was. But there's another little thing where he tries to impress her and something happens. Then Chuck's life changes. Everyone starts to like him. And that rolls around by, earlier in the movie they had taken basically an SAT test. And spoilers here, so if you don't want to know, skip ahead. They think Charlie Brown got a 100%. And so then everyone's like, oh, you got to be a genius to get a 100% on the SATs. So then he becomes the popular kid in school. Like, everyone wants his advice on stuff. Everyone's like dressing like him. His sister starts selling merchandise, like balloons with his face on on it, and so he's, finally getting his comeuppance, which is kind of cool for Chuck. He deserves it after all these years. And that part of the movie I liked. I'm like, okay, they're finally they're finally giving Chuck his break. Then it turns out it's not his test. Him and Peppermint Patty turn in their tests at the same time. And the teacher's like, did you guys write your names on your test? And they're like, oh, and they just grab random papers and sign them. And it ends up he signed Peppermint Patty's test, I guess. Which, how do you not notice, hey, this isn't my test when you're signing your name on it? Because she basically drew a picture on it, and it just happened to be all the right answers. So he's like, I don't deserve this. This isn't my test. I think it's supposed to go to Peppermint Patty. So now everyone's like, oh, we knew you were a loser, Charlie Brown. It's like, really? Well, honestly, it was only really Lucy that did that, even though she was wearing a Charlie Brown shirt. Then they're supposed to write a book report, but the little redhead girl's not there. She had to go back to wherever she moved from and take care of her sick grandmother. So Charlie Brown and they have to draw their partners out of a fishbowl, and Charlie Brown ends up drawing the little redhead girl. And he's like, well, since she won't be back in time to turn in the book report, I'll be the hero and I'll turn in the book report, and she won't have to work on it at all. I'll just do all the work. Okay, cool. He picks the hardest book probably for anyone his age, because everyone else is reading Green Eggs and Ham and stuff in the library, in the kids section. He goes and gets frickin' War and Peace. So he actually spends the entire weekend, reads the whole book, and he's starting to write down his report, and he goes blank for a little bit. And he's got this pencil that the little redheaded girl had dropped in class, and he picked up, and he's been trying to give it back to her through the whole movie, but he just doesn't have the nerve to go talk to her, hey, you dropped your pencil. So he's holding the pencil, and it just lets him start writing everything out. Even Linus compliments, this is the best book report I've ever read. And then Charlie Brown's embarrassed by something else that had happened, and so he sets the book report down, it blows away in the wind, and so they can't really turn it in. And Linus is explaining to the little redhead girl, oh, we were supposed to have a book report while you were gone, and Charlie was your partner, and he did the book report, but it just blew away. And she's like, oh, well, maybe we can redo it. And Charlie Brown just mopedly walks away. Then it suddenly cuts from middle of winter to, oh, it's summer vacation, Charlie Brown. And he finally works up the nerve to go talk to the little redheaded girl. And, so he goes over to her house, rings the doorbell. Her mother answers, or maybe it's her mother. Because he said Mrs. Or he says, nice to meet you, ma'am. So, it was her mother, and she's like, she's going away to summer camp. The bus is getting ready to leave. Of course, you get all this secondhand through Charlie Brown repeating what they're saying, just like in the old ones, because they're still doing the trumpet, the wah, 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 wah. And he's like, what? Her bus hasn't left yet? So you get basically what they're saying, what the adults are saying through the kids repeating it. So he runs off to try and catch the little redhead girl before her bus leaves. And of course, because he's Charlie Brown, everything has to get in his way, right? So, he kind of stops and says this little prayer, I've never asked you for anything, just help me out this one time. And of course, he manages to catch up with the little girl, and he's like, because another thing that happened was they had to pick pen pals for who they were going to keep in touch with over the summer vacation. And the teacher picks out Charlie Brown's, or Linus was calling out the names, and you're supposed to raise your hand if you're willing to be their pen pal. And he pulls out the name, and he's like, Charlie Brown. And everyone just keeps their hand down, and the little redhead girl's like, I'll be his pen pal. So Charlie Brown wants to catch her before she leaves to ask her, why will you be my pen pal? Why did you agree to be my pen pal when I'm such a doofus, So he finally catches up to her, and he asks her, first time he's ever spoke to her. And she's like, over the course of the year, I've seen how you were, and I don't think you're a doofus at all. You did this at the talent show, you did this at the dance, you did this at the assembly, you did the book report while I was away taking care of my grandmother, so I don't think you're a doofus. I think you're a really swell guy. and you're the type of person that, I would want to stay in contact with. And then he's like, oh, okay. And he's like, oh, by the way, here's your pencil. So she's like, oh, thanks, I've been looking everywhere for this. And then she gets on the bus and leaves. And that's pretty much the end of the movie, except every time they do a dramatic time jump, it's usually split up by Snoopy. At one point, Snoopy's trying to go into school with the kids, and they keep throwing them out saying no dogs, and at one point Lucy throws him in the dumpster, and he finds a typewriter, so he starts doing his It Was a Dark and Stormy Night and writing his novel. And it shows the introduction of how he decided to have the Red Baron be his World War II enemy and all that, which kind of plays out through the rest of the movie, surprisingly. But yeah, so anytime they're going to do a jump in Charlie Brown's life to a different point in time, they'll cut away to Snoopy writing another part of this novel, and they'll do the Snoopy flying ace fighting against the Red Baron, and then it'll cut back to Charlie Brown, and then it'll shift back to Snoopy doing his novel. So again, like I said, they kind of padded it out quite a bit with that. I know that did exist in the comic strip and in some of the other movies and stuff. It just seems like from what I remember of it in the older movies, it was done, the timing of it and the fitting in of it, it took place a little bit better for some reason. At least to me it did. So this one seems like they were kind of like, okay, we need a break here, so just hammer in this Snoopy story, and it's like, well, can't we segue into it somehow? No, just Charlie's walking in the house, he walks past Snoopy, and Snoopy goes back to writing. And it's kind of out of place at certain times. At one point, they're actually flashing between Snoopy's story and what's going on with Charlie Brown. And it's like, wait, isn't this supposed to be the segue to what happens next with him? And it's like they're flashing back and forth between this fantasy and reality type of thing. And again, I don't dislike this movie. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. It hit a lot of the tropes that it should for Peanuts. I just think they should have looked a little bit deeper into the source material and learned the original story structure a little bit better for how it played out, instead of just trying to hammer everything in okay, we got to make sure we hit this note, this note, this note, and this note. Okay, well, how do we get from note 1 to note 2? Snoopy. Okay, how do we get from note 2 to note 3? Snoopy. And it's just we're jumping from one trope to the next trope and hammering Snoopy in between them, and that's where I think it kind of loses a little bit. It could have been structured a lot better. As far as a star rating on this one, I'm gonna have to just do middle of the road and give it a 3 out of 5. I wanted to go a little bit higher and do a 3.5, but like I said, had it had a better story arc or structure to it, it probably would have got a 3.5. But for what it was still a good movie. I'd still recommend seeing it, especially if you like the Peanuts characters or any of the Charlie Brown universe. Definitely check it out. Other than that, it was very well done. So yeah, that is it for Peanuts. I do got at least one more movie review coming up. Hopefully I can get more done before the end of the year. My main concern is I really wanted to see Star Wars Episode 7 when it opens next week or the week after, but it's not playing at the home theater, it's playing across town, so, or as Charlie Brown would say, arg. So yeah, I gotta figure out a way to get across town to see more movies. But yeah, so that's it for this episode. Again, as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you at the movies.